Harry and Klinger found whenever assessing children for special ed that classroom contexts are seldom taken into account as a source of children's behavioral difficulties. My question in rebuttal to that is why? I don't understand why the classroom is being ignored in this, where the said behavior is taking place. Why is that environment not being assessed? Why is that environment not been taken into account? With my experience with ABA, it's important to figure out what that trigger to that behavior was, and how can you figure that out if you're not looking in the classroom where that behavior is happening? Why are you not analyzing that environment that is or is not supporting that child, especially when parents are coming back and caregivers are coming back and saying this behavior does not happen at home? Stop making stereotypes about those parents and figure out if that's true or not, because you could be setting up this child to be put in special ed to have that label put on them, and for it being very difficult, if ever, to get rid of that label. So whenever you're looking at those contexts, and as a social worker or as a school psychologist, you should be analyzing that. But as a teacher yourself, before sending that child into assessment or whatever, you need to reflect on yourself and stop blaming it on the parents, because research shows that it's barely ever the parents. It's not about socioeconomics. It's not about those things. It's other outside factors, and one of them is your classroom. Colleagues find that children's behavior immediately changes when in special ed. And I think that just supports that point even further. People will come back and say, oh, well then obviously they needed to be in special ed. No. If they obviously needed to be in special ed, then that behavior would be reoccurring in special ed. It wouldn't matter what the environment was. If they're in the special ed classroom and those behaviors stop, then one, that was not a true assessment, and two, as the general ed classroom teacher, you need to be checking up on that student. You need to be figuring out if that student's doing better, and if they do, then you say, what supports are you giving this student that I was not giving that student? You need to be saying, what can I do in the general ed classroom? And then you need to ease that child back into your environment. You need to be providing those supports. You need to be doing whatever that special ed teacher was doing that you were not, and evaluate yourself and change those to support that student, so that student doesn't spend forever in special education when they can easily be in a general ed classroom. You need to learn what those supports are, and you need to provide those. In Collins' article, Bad Bad Boy, it says that the pattern is important to identify because it speaks to the way in which the teacher as an authority figure regulates behavior in the discourse community of her classroom. Whenever we think, as educators, whenever we think, I need to take this student out of my classroom, I need to remove them from environment, the first question you should ask yourself is, why are they here? And the answer, hopefully, should be to learn. They're in your classroom so that they can learn. If you remove them from that environment, are they going to be able to learn? No. Okay, so then you need to ask yourself, if they continue in this environment, are they going to be able to learn? If the answer is yes, then they need to stay there. Then you need to ask yourself, if they stay in this environment, are others going to be able to learn? The answer is yes, then they need to stay there. And you need to figure out how to handle that student in the best way. You need to figure out what conversation you're going to have with that student so they can re-enter your classroom positively and still be able to learn. Now, if that student remains in your classroom and you think that they cannot learn and they really do need to take a break from your classroom, or that they are holding other children back from learning, and then maybe think about removing that student. But removing that student from the environment is not helping them. Putting them in some secret or quiet box or whatever it was in Collins, that's not acceptable, because that student's not learning. You're not their babysitter, you're their teacher. You're there to teach them. They're there to learn. You can't remove them and that be okay. So if kids are in special ed, if you're constantly removing them, if you're constantly suspending them for these behaviors and not supporting them, then they're going down that spiral. They're going down that slide into the school to prison pipeline, these behaviors need to be truly considered. They do not need to be automatically suspension, automatically suspension, automatically suspension, because that's not acceptable. That's going to send them to prison. That's not going to set them up for a life of success. That's going to set them up for a life of failure if people aren't there to provide those supports. As a pre-service teacher who's begun to create their classroom management philosophy and has included in it a form of community of learners and will strive to display the characteristics of a warm demand or authority figure, how do I guarantee that I am providing the supports that my students need to stay out of the school to prison pipeline? I need to make sure that my students know and have the norm that they're not going to be sent to the office for bad behavior. They're going to be dealing with me, the authoritarian in the classroom. I'm the one who has high expectations for them, and I'm going to make sure that my students know that, and I'm going to be the one following up with those expectations. But in the Hart article, it says that school personnel can learn to monitor the impact of their own beliefs and biases on their professional decision making, and so I need to make sure that those expectations are one that they can be met by my students, and two, that they are not biased in any way. I need to make sure, and also going through with all of my classroom management, that I am not biased in dealing with one student compared to another. And IUPUI's education program does a great job of this in making sure that we're reflecting on ourselves and what opinions and biases and judgments that we can be bringing into our classroom, and making sure that those aren't swaying our students in one way or another, or they're not swaying our decisions one way or another. And I think this is a practice that I definitely need to continue after I graduate from IUPUI, because those opinions and prejudices, they're going to change because I'm going to change as an educator. And so I need to make sure that I'm constantly reflecting on those. And a fact that I just found pretty astonishing, that I think that I will always remember as I am dealing with students and as I am reflecting on my classroom management of the day or of the week or of that school year. I remember this fact from Kellum's 1998 article that says that found that boys who displayed aggressive behavior in the fourth grade were 50 times more likely to display conduct problems in middle school if they were in poorly managed first grade classrooms. As a pre-service teacher who wants to teach kindergarten to third grade, that has a huge effect on me. I need to make sure that I am reflecting on myself and in my classroom as a whole, and making sure that my classroom is set up to support each other as a whole, that they know that they're there for one another, and they know that I am there for them, although I do have high expectations for them. And I just need to make sure that I'm providing these supports for my students. I know I keep saying provide the supports, but to me, that's important. You can't just go in there, teach your lesson, wash your hands, be done, be like, all right, school day's over. You need to make sure that you're pushing your students forward. And that's what it's all about. Your students learning and you teaching them and pushing them forward. And so your teaching philosophy, your classroom management philosophy all need to be geared towards pushing your students forward